All right, welcome to the July 8th, 2025 Climate Action Committee meeting. So we start with a roll call.
You do not need to start with a roll call.
Okay.
You're good for that. We do need to do minutes and we'll have to do a roll call for that because it's not.
All right, so first order of agenda is approval of previous meetings minutes, which were sent out on July 3rd. Motion to approve the minutes by anybody?
Motion to approve the minutes.
All right, motion to approve by Paul. Second. Seconded by
Thank you. And then, yeah, you got
All right.
roll call.
and then, yeah, so roll call,
Like with yourselves.
abstain, fair enough. Online, we have
Let's see everybody on the.
Owen
Aye.
And then Fred.
and Fred,
Aye.
great, and the vice chair votes aye. So the motion passes.
Oh, you still have to do
This is it, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the second agenda item is our guest of honor. Discussion with the superintendent of the transfer station. Damaris.
Hi, it's funny, I don't know where to talk. Nice to meet everybody. It's appreciate the invitation. I guess my thought process was more of just kind of an update of where we are. Certainly working with Gabby, trying to get ideas of ways we can, promote sustainability. I also, we'll look to you guys for input and suggestions. Obviously, as a public work division, we're always taking feedback on what's realistic and, what our challenges are. Michael, how you doing? Good to see you. I went through your page to look at the sustainability page to just kind of bang down the items that you guys kind of have as listed agenda items. Manage waste responsibility, reduce where possible. I guess what I'm seeing in here, my biggest suggestion and efforts will be really for reducing trash tonnage. Food waste is not easy, because it's really not easy, but that's the one that's really most manageable. I think that's where we're gonna have our biggest impact. Obviously, the food waste program we have right now is everyone familiar with how we manage food waste. We have a company called AgriCycle. They're under a contract. We've used them for probably about 3 years now, and we have another 2 years on the contract. They come to the transfer station and to each of the schools. They collect food waste and they bring it to anaerobic digester up in Maine. Obviously, Maine isn't ideal because of the distance, but to some extent, that's the reality of where the digesters are. My thought process is that I think once money starts coming into the food waste diversion world, they're gonna see the opportunities to build more digesters. I would say that when I started at the transfer station in 2014, a lot of the engineering companies really thought that digesters were gonna happen all in around this area. They thought it was a real next step, next wave. They had divisions devoted to building anaerobic digesters, and there just was not a consistent supply of food waste into that system. So They never really got built, those divisions kind of dissolved, and we were left with, I think there's one Vanguard. Vanguard has one out in Hadley, and there's, you know, various ones in Connecticut. And then obviously we work with this company, AgriCycle Clean Energy, and they bring it up to Maine. Since I've started with the town of Needham, City of Boston's done some pilot programs, so that's definitely a stream that's, you know, happening more. Cambridge and, you know, Needham, these communities that are, you know, committing to food waste are gonna energize, or my hope is that they're gonna energize the food waste diversion world, and we're gonna see efficiencies. So instead of going to Maine, we're gonna go to Leominster. You know, let's cut down that greenhouse gas of traveling up to Maine. But that hasn't happened yet. So I guess it's sort of a waiting game. City of Boston started with 10,000 households in a pilot program, and they've expanded it to 20,000. So they're kind of committed to that. That's a curbside program. All of that food waste goes over to Charlestown under the bridge. Waste Management has a slurry machine, and they take that and it goes out to a wastewater treatment plant up in Lawrence. I think some of the concerns with that might be the PFAS in the wastewater, and PFAS possibly in some of the food waste packaging. So, you know, nothing's perfect, but I think we're working towards, you know, really making food diversion a serious aspect of, you know, waste management, the way, you know, recycling is now just kind of assumed and regulated as part of your waste stream. Food waste should happen that way too. We saw a pretty good rollout with the schools. We worked with nutrition services. Gabby and I worked with nutrition services. Jen Puddleman and Emily over at nutrition services are great. We work with the heads of the cafeterias over there, and we go to the schools and we work with the kids. You know, there's a little bit of trash in the food waste collection bins. And we also, at the transfer station, we allow plastic bags, because the food waste is gonna go through a depackager. That essentially I've never seen it, but it's a machine that'll squeeze out the kind of the food waste, and the residuals are dealt with as trash that are managed in an incinerator. So again, not perfect, but it's better than just throwing the you know, food waste into the incinerator. I try and track monthly costs for the food waste and the trash, and currently we pay a little bit more per ton. When we're very efficient, we're paying a little more per ton for food waste collection than we are for trash. So it's not a money saver yet. At the schools, especially when the schools aren't running very efficiently, it's a lot more. And I'd say at this point, we're probably diverting about 35, 36 tons per month. That number should be higher. Typically, if you characterize a trash load, municipal household trash load, you're gonna say anywhere between 25% to 40% by weight is probably food waste. So if you can glean that out, you're really talking about serious reduction. We're nowhere near that.
Do you know what we are right now?
That?
Do you know what percentage we are right now, roughly?
I don't, so I would say we probably have maybe 1,000 households participating, but I don't know how much they're participating, and I don't know what percentage of their food waste they're diverting. But so for instance, like this last month, we did a little over 700 tons through the transfer station of trash. About half of that is municipal solid waste. So that's, say, 300 tons. If you're talking about 25% of that, we should be diverting somewhere between, like, you know, 75 to 100 tons of food waste out of there. We probably did about 12. So there's an opportunity there. We need to educate, we need to, you know, get the word out, and we need to find out, you know, kind of why people aren't participating. But also, I guess I'm hopeful because when we have it in the schools, we're talking to the kids. And it's like, this is how you manage your waste. So when I was a kid, you know, you didn't always know what to do with stuff, and then suddenly you're, you know, I'm still one of those people who I tear out the window on an envelope because I always did it and can't stop. Like, so whenever I recycle an envelope, I do it because that's how I was trained. So I do it without thinking. Hopefully these kids are gonna be like, oh, I've got a banana peel. I can't just throw it in the trash. It doesn't belong there. So, you know, the elementary schools have been good. Sunita is great, best program probably in town. Pollard is surprisingly really good, and the high school's good. So, I think standardizing the school program is a good thing.
Can you
And
give me those numbers, the total numbers again for how much total waste comes? Takes out?
so it's variable. I would say last month we did about 750 tons to the transfer station.
Mhm.
I'd say about half of that is probably municipal solid waste. Maybe a little less than half. Our trend has been more like bulky waste and, you know, commercial cleanouts are trending probably maybe even more like 60-40. So the yellow bag trash, even if you call it for, but we should be, I mean, if we were at 50, that would be a minimum. So like our target goal should be to try and get up to 50 without, that shouldn't be a heavy lift. It's just more like getting people to participate. I did take some of the screenshots. I was gonna try and do a PowerPoint, but I couldn't put it together. I had some just a couple of things from our, I didn't even cut and paste them, from our survey that we did, and we haven't presented the survey completely with the consultant. We've done a presentation to the solid waste committee, but we haven't presented to the select board. But we know we got 2,318 responses for the survey, which is good for a municipal survey. A lot of people aren't that responsive. Half the people said they use the food program. So that's over 1,000 people. That's not bad. But 97% said they recycle. So if you're recycling, why wouldn't you do your food waste? I kind of don't get that difference. So that's a lot of people, like why aren't they engaged? What don't they see? Is it the gross factor? Is it that they?
Tell you what, we struggled with originally was fruit flies. And finding a bin that was truly big enough.
Yeah.
Like, the compost bins are all like this big, the ones you buy. Getting a dog food container. Like ones that are airtight, but dog food container, because it's enough to actually handle the volume that we create. But
Yeah.
also keep the bugs out.
Yep.
So I think that was like a legitimate, we had to force ourselves to keep doing it because the house would just have so many fruit flies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also people who compost.
Well,
I compost everything, so what's left is like not worth taking to the food. I mean, I know some of you take,
Yeah.
but it's meat and bones and stuff, so it
Yeah.
just goes in the garbage.
Yeah.
But that's the only reason I don't use it. Everything goes in my compost.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not-
and I mean, that's another thing that, you know, Gabby and I have been talking about is, we get grant money from the state, from the DEP, to promote diversion. And, we actually were gonna go and get some home composters, last year. But there kind of seemed to be a little uptick in, you know, rat and rodent issues around town, and I thought it was probably the wrong time. You know, you kind of have to choose your moment, and if you roll it out right at a time where people are really concerned about it. I heard people, you know, pushing back on home composting, so I thought it wasn't the right time, but we do have that money. And for, you know, a couple $100, you know, we could, you know, maybe like $1,000, we could buy a bunch of home composters. And even if people are just diverting, like you said, their vegetative material, then they bring their meats and bones to the transfer station. That keeps the smells out. Generally, a rat's not gonna chase a collard
There
green.
may be some education involved.
100%.
Because quite frankly, as long as you don't throw things like meat and products like that in, you don't really attract rodents. The occasional chipmunk.
I think we need to get ahead of that though.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah. I think helping people to understand that, it's not, you can just
Yep.
look at anywhere.
Yep.
And that's how nature does it.
Yep.
You just don't wanna do stuff that will attract rodents, and that tends to be
Yeah,
meat and things like that.
yeah.
Hey, couple other questions about the anaerobic digester. If you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure.
One was, do you know, for the anaerobic digester in Maine that AgriCycle manages for us, what percentage of their food stream are we? And like, in other words,
Really minimal.
it's a minimum.
Yeah, they're
So they need a very-
all over New England.
So they need a substantial volume, and that's one of the.
Huge. If you don't get a guaranteed, steady, consistent stream, you can't build one of those things. They're so expensive, like 65 million probably.
65 million.
And that's what I remember as a figure back in 2014. I don't know if there's been efficiencies, so that maybe that was like. I should get an actual number instead of throwing something out that's
Okay.
probably irresponsible, I'll get a number.
So I'm curious why Maine, is it because they have more space and it's cheaper to build up there?
It's on a dairy farm,
So they have another source.
so their methane generating cow manure is like probably a big part of what they do. And that's probably where they built it. They tend to be built on farms, from what I've seen.
Yeah, because we worked with them they were the people we were looking at for a long time.
Yeah.
And that was where they had it.
Okay.
Right, that's where they found the demand to do it.
We don't have any legislative hurdles in Massachusetts preventing the, red tape, things like
Oh, you
that.
need to build a digester up?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's always, it seems like there's like, those like hidden.
Yeah, biomass is often can fall on either side. So some people argue that biomass is not a clean form, right? And yeah,
It does qualify towards our,
correct.
the, what do they call the electricity, the class 1 renewables, right? So class 1
Class
or
two.
class
I think
two.
it was class two, and yeah, people argue about it, but it's not, that wasn't, I think the bigger concern is there a problem actually building these things? And I don't think so, because the way they're built, there's no smell or anything. That's the beauty of it, because it's a digester, it's all self-contained. So it's not like, you got stinky piles of manure on a farm,
The supply of fuel, for lack of a better term, is, in my experience, the biggest issue with biomass-based generation. Even in California and Central Valley, right, you'd think there'd be thousands of them.
Right.
And there aren't. And it's really hard to get sort of steady, because at least in California, right, so like you can't just chop down a forest and bring that as biomass, right? So there are certain kinds of biomass that allow you to qualify for, so it has to be, construction waste that's diverted, or if you've got pistachio shells or walnut shells, like things that would otherwise be trash. And then you've got orchards that go through like natural cycles of replacement. But finding contracts, like long-term contracts for that is hard. When you build a natural gas or a coal plant, you can sign a 50-year contract because you know exactly where that fuel is coming from. But on the biomass, it's like, yeah, I mean, I hope this farm is around in 20 years, but I don't know if it is. And if all of a sudden 30% of my input source goes away, like I gotta find someone else to replace it. So in my experience, that's been the biggest hurdle for building this. It's interesting.
It's good. Thank you.
long-term supply, right?
It's feedstock, that's where I was looking for.
What about restaurants?
We don't,
I know, I'm just wondering, do we know if any, because you remember, we did,
you'd think so, yeah, I mean, I don't know how many in town
I know Volante, I think it's using AgriCycle.
are they, yeah.
But they're the only ones I know of.
there's a fair volume, you consider the foods, when you consider grocery stores and restaurants.
Yeah, a lot of grocery stores, cause you see the containers around.
Yeah.
I think Trader Joe's. Thought I saw their containers at Trader Joe's.
I think I saw them there too.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I mean, that I guess would be the thing that I would concentrate on. I mean, for the RTS right now, we're sort of waiting for, the service delivery study, you kind of went out and, without giving away anything, like the survey was like, most people want to keep the operation at, there was more energy to keep the operation as is than there was desire to change it.
To
And
go
the
to
people who
curbside.
did want to change it weren't interested in paying more. And it is more expensive to do a curbside collection, so that's not exactly a mandate to move forward, and it's definitely not a mandate to go to curbside, so, my thought process is after this comes out, we're gonna work on, increasing our food waste diversion at the transfer station. I would think that we'd get a better result if we increase the number of places we went. Like maybe in back here, we could have a drop area, or up at the Fazia, we could have a drop area. The problem with that is when they're unmonitored, you get more contamination. It's not free to collect from these places, so if people from out of town start driving here on their way to like Boston, then Needham taxpayers are subsidizing residents driving through. The city of Boston has drop containers, and you go on the website and there's a 4-digit code, and you access that, you open the bin and you drop your food waste. If you have something you need to get rid of quickly, you can drop that. Again, we also have the pilot program for curbside. Very expensive for Boston. At one point early on, I calculated that the city of Boston was paying about $500 per ton for disposal of food waste, which is ridiculous. Think of MSW through the transfer station, something like maybe a little over 100, maybe 100, between 105, maybe 110 per ton. That's including equipment and transportation and tipping fee. I would say when we get a good efficient collection at the transfer station, we're probably talking about 112 to 118 per ton for the food waste. So we're starting to really get into that zone where the food waste from the transfer station is starting to become cost efficient. And the landscape of trash costs are likely going to show really high increases in MSW and trash tipping rates. So even if we get something of a slight increase on food waste, we should become more cost efficient than trash. Connecticut is sort of ahead of us in terms of their crisis with trash. They aren't managing their trash very well, but they have been building small digesters. So part of like what I'd like to do is just go see what they're doing, because I think they have smaller, ones that maybe don't require as much. Like if they can make it efficient and make it cost effective, still a smaller one, then, that's when maybe let's build one, let's put one real close.
Volante, put one over Volante.
You know what I mean, right?
Right.
Put it on the
Chris
compost.
Yoder and Dover.
Put it on the, the yard waste area at the transfer
Or
station.
there too. Got it.
I mean, I doubt we'd have the space for it, and we certainly don't wanna have that much truck traffic coming in.
You heard that.
Central Ave is plenty backed up, so we don't need more truck traffic, but it's just interesting, efficiencies all over.
Matt, what percentage of households are now using private haulers, do you know?
So based on what I see from the number of stickers that we have, I would say probably about half the town has a company that collects. And I would say a good percentage of those people who have curbside also still come to the transfer station.
Okay.
We have a ton of stickers out there. There's a lot of people who are using their, JT trash or their whatever bins and dumping their recycling. So they have a, private hauler bin, but they're also coming to the transfer station.
Because they can't fill up.
So I think, a good percentage of people, in our survey, the majority of people say they are using the transfer station at least once a week, but a lot of people say that they are, coming like once a month, a good number. So that's obviously not someone who needs their household trash at the transfer station. We're seeing a reduction in the tonnage of yellow bag trash, but we're seeing really high volumes at the transfer station. So it's hard to tell really, it's kind of hard to gauge what's happening. Obviously, COVID threw all our statistics off. It's hard to track like anything linear because it's like, up and down and up and down. I would say a lot of people do have curbside collection, but maybe the people who have it are satisfied with that, and so they just want also to come to the transfer station for mattresses, for textiles, for book donation, for the swap shop.
For when they get backed up, because usually you
Yeah.
only have those one bin, that one recycling bin, you could easily fill that up.
100%, right?
Do you know what percentage of their solid waste might be food waste, and are they doing any diversion?
The haulers.
The haulers?
No, there was a guy who wanted to offer it and nobody wanted to eat. So one of the people who does curbside in Needham and brings their material to the transfer station, sent out to his customer base, which is probably like, maybe like 600-700 households, whether they wanted food waste collection, and they were unwilling to pay for it. So it is kind of expensive to get your food waste picked up. They tried to do a pilot program in Natick when I first started. This is probably back in, 2015, 16. And Natick offered it for 500 households, and they brought it to us. And they did some collection at the schools as part of their, their tipping fee was offset by collecting at schools. And as soon as that program ended, they offered their community like the chance to purchase food waste as a service that they could purchase, and no one wanted it. So, Framingham has gone through, they tried to contract it, and I think we're working with Black Earth, and they got maybe 1,000 households, which is pretty good.
That was good.
Maybe it's less, maybe it's fewer than that. I knew the sustainability recycling coordinator over there, but she quit, so,
Have any towns done anything like where they required it of their private haulers, or
I don't think there's no regulation.
there's?
So, I mean, the state has a ban on any producer that produces more than 1,000 pounds per week. So half a ton a week, you have to manage it.
Got
it.
But not at the household level.
No.
It's
And
just-
it'd be really, how would you regulate?
Yeah, I don't know. how
Yeah,
you-
I'd be going through your trash, opening it up, going, aha, pizza.
But from a policy
Come out here.
perspective, from a policy perspective, if the state wanted to increase the food waste, they could go to haulers and say, you have to deal with not,
Yeah.
by household, you have to do something with it.
Yeah.
They could do that.
But it sounds like because they have that legislation, they've taken, what's the word, when they've legislated on it, subject, towns can't.
But that's, yeah.
Yeah, it would be at the state level, but I don't think there's
That
any
makes sense.
mechanism for really enforcing it.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, so the DEP has a list of weight ban items. But again, every time they increase or change it, residents, get worried that somehow, when they do the textile ban, it's like in November of 22, people are like, oh, am I gonna get fined if I put a T-shirt into my trash? And it's like, no one can check that. We really can't. It's just, we want you to think along those lines. So.
Demand, create
Yeah.
demand that people wanting to do it.
So anyway, so food waste, obviously, that will be our, probably, our focus over the next, what do we do? It also costs a lot more if you have many locations, like if you did like the Big Bellies, but turned them into compost collections. Collecting from multiple, the vendor's gonna charge you a ton of money for that, just to stop. So that doesn't necessarily make sense. Would it make sense for the town to like get a truck and do it? Maybe. I don't know. It maybe doesn't make sense. I don't know. But those are the kind of things that we're gonna explore probably with senior management at DPW and with you guys and with Gabby. Yeah, obviously with the website, doing outreach, education. A big part of what we do is working across like departments, nutrition services, sustainability, public works, getting that coordination working. Gabby and I met with the library to talk about expanding the library of things. Again, the RTS gets grant money from the DEP for diversion. So we thought maybe there were items that we could purchase with that grant money to, supplement the library of things. All of this is just to get people to reduce, I don't, I'm not against capitalism, but to reduce just buying things they don't need to necessarily buy, or buy something that they only need to use once, it's hard because, businesses don't like to hear us talk about like reducing purchasing, but you really sometimes have to think that way, like. I would say a big problem that we have on the recycling side of things is that, packaging seems to change quicker than recycling, so recycling is always reactive. The products come through and the processors try and recycle it, but marketers want something different, they want it to look fancy, so they always blend materials, so they'll have, a paper carton with a aluminum lining and plastic cap or plastic whatever, and they call it recyclable or sustainable because the elements prior to being assembled were all recyclable materials, but they put them together and the processors can't handle that. It all becomes trash. So, that's a big problem. Unfortunately, the marketers, the packagers, and the petrochemical companies get away with it, but the recyclers get blamed for saying recycling's a lie. So, NPR and Greenpeace will come out with studies that say that recycling's not real, and people come to the transfer station and tell us that we're all a bunch of phonies. I'm like, hey, go find Exxon and ExxonMobil and talk to them. We're trying to do whatever we can, and we're handling it downstream. The upstream people seem to be living large and making a ton of money. And the recyclers, if you go to a mass recycle conference, right after those studies came out, people were like pulling their hair out. They're like, why are we getting attacked by NPR? Why are we getting attacked by Greenpeace? We're really trying. And, Brooke Nash, who was the head of recycling and for DEP, was just like, she just gave some of the most amazing impassioned like defenses of recycling. And, it works, but it's only works when the packaging is, able to be processed. It's not, I think the problem with recycling is people presented it like a magic bullet, and it never has been, and it never will be. It's a good way of managing material, and it's a better way of managing material, but it's not solving a problem, it's just helping mitigate a problem.
Can you comment on a little bit in that vein, the costs of whether it's landfill or incineration and how that might change in the next number of years with space? Because that number will go up.
Yeah,
To the way.
so,
The question is, how does that play into the public's view on all of this? Because they're worried about cost of like getting rid of food waste.
Yeah.
That could fail in comparison to what could happen down the road.
yeah,
Do we have any of that we could tell the public that says, guess what's coming down the road?
yeah.
And it's not gonna be pretty.
So I did a presentation for the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. And it was in, I think, March or April, but I took I probably have the file. I took the recycling tonnage for this year, this fiscal year up to that point, and it had been like 1,300 tons of household recycling from the transfer station. We were able to manage 1,300 tons in our system with source separating, and we'd had $6,000 in costs and $4,000 worth of revenue. So essentially for $2,000, we've managed about 1,300 tons of material. If you took that and made it single stream, the cost would have been around $64,000. So the $2,000, $64,000. If if you took that and just tipped it as trash, the trash tipping fee would have been over $100,000. So 2,000 versus 100,000. So does it make sense? Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense to me, you know. There's more in that than just those numbers, but there's transportation involved and, you know, obviously you can get a denser load of trash than you can of like commingled recycling. So transportation would offset that a little bit, but you're essentially, even our source separating versus a single stream model where it all goes together and has to be sorted, makes sense. We make, probably right now, we're making about like $48 per ton revenue on cardboard. Paper has kind of bottomed out to, so we're hardly making any money on it, but it's about a couple bucks per ton revenue. Single stream costs about 50 to $55 per ton to process into the commodities. Whereas like the commingled that we have, the blue bins up there, that's probably around like 40. So our model is efficient and it saves money. And it's probably up to me to promote that better, to tell people, yeah, the reason why we do this is because there really is a cost savings. And, you know, maybe it's a good time to do that because everyone's thinking about Pollard and how much money everything costs. And there was a lot of pushback at town meeting about, you know, smaller projects that used to get green lighted and people are upset. So maybe we promote what we're doing. And then when they see what we're doing and it's intentional and it's, you know, for a reason, then we get buy-in and then we start incorporating the food waste and say, well, let's do this. So maybe there's an opportunity here, you know, it's like sometimes the time.
And since we're dealing with commodities, it's really important that people understand these go up and down. And when you separate, yes,
Really
there'll be
go up
times
and
you won't get a lot of paper, times you get more. Cardboard's been good, metal is always great.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And so the better a job we do of separation, the more we can take advantage of the value of those products. I think we do have to do that.
Yeah,
And I think if you wanna go back, the number of people who do say they do recycling, and I believe a lot of people do. I'm not sure that most of the people have any idea, but if you take a lot of your recycling out of the stream. And what you have, and what you're paying to dispose of, whether you're hiring somebody to do it or taking it in. That percentage of food waste is going way up in most households. I mean, think about what most people throw away. If you truly do recycle. There's not a lot left other than food. And I don't think people realize that when they're doing a trash roll, if they do recycling, which you say people do, I think people do, that a lot of when they say, I don't want to pay more for food waste, but I don't think they realize how much they're paying right now. Most of that is probably food waste.
Yep.
Right.
Well, I mean, I know you guys have it on on the website about doing the audit the waste stream. You know, I'm definitely interested in that. I know a lot of people hate that. It is pretty gross, but doing an audit of the waste stream and, you know, really getting a scale.
Yeah.
Like, because we did that originally and it used to be for how much recycling was in the waste stream, but now, you know, let's do the whole thing.
That could be an interesting student project. Have every student audit their waste stream as an assignment. And come back and say which percentages are food, which percentages are recycling. That would be really fascinating. You get that done?
Well, no, actually, that might not be as hard because you're not asking them to like commit to doing food waste stuff, but they could for a week or a couple of days.
Yeah.
Just take one garbage can, that just put all the food in there, put all your other junk in something else, and then just weigh those two at the end of a week.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's not the same thing as crawling through the stuff, right?
Yes,
Which could be
but the other thing, you're gonna get a more honest answer on what people do at the back end. If you tell them ahead of time, oh, weigh your food, they're gonna be like really careful about it. But if you go to a trash bag, you know what they've actually done. All these people who say they recycle, it's like, oh, no.
So it'd have to be like a pop quiz.
Pop quiz.
Tomorrow, tonight, go into your trash bin, weigh it. If you have a compost bin, weigh it.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, can I just ask like how the education at the school has gone and like how that kind of works?
so, I mean, for me, it's way more catch as catch can. I just go when I have availability and I would love to go to the schools more often.
Yeah.
It's not formalized.
Yes, there's no like specific class or anything.
No, there was a teacher at Pollard, Miss Kraus, I think, at Pollard, who did a program about the digester. When we first started the program, that was great. But I don't think it's been incorporated into any kind of,
I mean, it was the kids who originally, it was actually what was Hillside.
Yeah.
Those were the kids who got this thing going, because we work with them. They wanted to feed us. They helped make it happen. So I think the kids are motivated and, and interested and, I think the indications that they're doing a pretty good job in that separation.
There's like a like organized setup at all the schools
Yeah.
too, where they can kind of step through like, okay, this is trash, this is for liquid. This is so I think that helps.
don't do liquids anymore. We were
Oh,
gonna do that originally, but it turned out to be, that they can just throw that away. They were trying to create a special diversion bucket or something, but
yeah.
the custodial staff was absolutely opposed to it. It was like slopping and so.
That's
Probably get really heavy too.
Yeah,
And then, I mean, you are dealing too with back of house, front of house too, at all the schools, is that there's a whole bunch of work that efficient services people do, so that in the back of the house, when they prepare the food, they can separate. Right, because everybody thinks, oh, it's all about the kids separating what they need, but there's a lot that happens when they do prep.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of work had to be done in each of the kitchens to get that set up.
and I mean, it's worth noting too, that there's a lot of really, really good food that's wasted at the schools. It's really sad. I mean, kids will come with like a hamburger with one bite out of it, a perfectly good apple, and like the carrot's still in the bag, and they just tip it, and they put it into the food bin, so it goes into the food bin, but it's like, let's talk about, I mean, I mean, food insecurity, being a good citizen of the world, those things, it's like, I heard, someone talk about like a program where you could do like, how did this banana get here? Talk to kids, like, how much, like, this didn't come from like Natick. This banana came from far away, and somebody had to grow it, and somebody had to plant a banana tree, and to like waste this is a shame, it's really interesting. So I think you could really make a curriculum that could start at that level, because
Sorry. I was gonna say like even like a guest speaker or some presentation for half an hour, just for information, kind of like that, like where a banana came from, what happens, and like why that impacts each kid might be helpful. Just to have some reasoning behind why to put the banana in the compost.
Yeah.
As opposed to the trash. I think that at my school helped. Like we had one of our teachers just talk for half an hour, make a quick Google slide like presentation. And that just helped people like realize why they're doing what they're doing. And I think that makes it take the percentage of kids that are gonna put that stuff in the compost a little higher than.
what age was that when you got that presentation?
It was last year. So
Oh, okay.
my school's 7th grade to 12th grade. And that like even like the next week, it was just way more obvious that kids were going to the compost first and then the trash.
Yeah.
So that might help with the school.
There's a funny thing that happens at the cafeterias where if you want the slice of pizza, you have to take a vegetable.
Yeah.
And the kids want the pizza, but they don't want the vegetable, but they take it. And so they're required. I think
Yeah.
that's part of like and obviously, yes, that's what you want, but I think that leads to additional food waste. But I don't know what the answer is there. I mean, I'm not. I try not to get involved in too many problems, like you could really dig yourself into a knot.
I mean, nutrition service people also try to do a good job educating the kids
Oh, great.
on what they should be eating and
Yeah.
making. Aside from those black bean brownies, which I never liked, the stuff they make now,
It's
I mean,
awesome.
it's fabulous.
It's awesome.
It's fabulous.
Matt, I was interested when you were talking about the cost to take away the food, cost to take away, the solid waste, the cardboard, et cetera. I'm wondering if we could do like an infographic that shows the average homeowner, here's what your taxes are going to cost you if you went and you just threw it all in the trash. Here's what it's going to cost you if you separate out the cardboard. Here's what it's going to cost you if you separate out the metal and the plastic. Here's what's going to cost you if you also separate out the food, and just kind of show that like burn down.
Yeah,
And I mean, I think we've tried the sustainability message for how long? 1970.
right.
I think the money might actually get a different group of people processing it.
So a couple of the, just, sorry, there were a couple of things that I saw in the study, whereas I took some of these slides, I should have put this together, where did I put it? But they were about like people's responses on, like, one of the questions is, so when it comes to trash, what's the most important to you? Or when it comes to trash collection services, which is the most important to you? Cost and convenience were equal. And then slightly behind it, but not super small, was environmental stewardship. So it's there. It's there, but the two drivers were cost and convenience. And there was another one that I thought was interested. There was a question, and the question was, the town could do more to reduce waste. Strongly agree was 11%, agree was 27%, neither agree nor disagree was 51%, and then disagree was 9%. So there's a kind of an apathy there, but there's also like, how do we engage those people, you know?
Yeah.
You know, it's hard because I do sometimes see someone at the transfer station, they ask me about like, oh, what do I do with this? And I start to explain to them and the person will just say, just tell me where to put it, don't talk to me, like, just, so I'm like, okay, like I get excited, I start talking to them, but you gotta watch out a little bit with someone maybe not at the right,
Right.
and then, there was another one that I thought was interesting, oh yeah, waste reduction is important to me, strongly agree, and agree were like 80 some odd percent, so waste reduction is important to people, so I think,
Good.
and of course, these are people who answered the survey.
Yeah, that's still,
But there is some intrinsic value to them to reducing it, and maybe we can get them to get over the inertia. If we
Yeah.
also say, effectively lowering your taxes.
Yeah,
If you do this.
yeah, and I mean, I think DPW is good about being practical. You know, I think this group is very inspired, but I think most people are just want to be practical and cost efficient.
Yeah.
So I think that may be a good message. So, and obviously it's a multi-pronged way of getting where we want to go. You know, you guys can kind of promote the mission and the ideal. And then, you know, DPW can just promote like the practical boots on the ground, like, hey, we're just doing this because it's cost effective and it works.
going back to the idea of the infographic. Can you probably, you must probably have the data that if you just took like over a year, the total tonnage of everything, all the metal, I mean, because it would be interesting, because I think that's what you're looking at, right? I mean, doing it over week, month is hard, and it's a little biased, because more people will bring stuff that's heavy, but it would be interesting to do that, because you have over a year, how much goes into the trash, right? How much the weight of the recycling is, how much the weight of the metal is, the cardboard. You might be able to come up with something that says, this is what percentage of your stuff is not going to a landfill, total stuff.
Yeah.
Because that would be an aggregate of what everyone in the town who uses it throws out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Gabby and I can work on something.
Because I think it would surprise people.
I think it would.
But
Every time you say this to me, it feels new to me.
But I think one of the things that sort of skews it too is that a lot of our tonnage, like I said, 60% of that is probably more like clean out trash, like
Yeah.
clean out,
Yes.
and that skews it, like you're not talking household trash, and that's where it gets a little bit,
You might want to back that out because
yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. Well, we're sort of working on that. We've changed our scale rates to reflect what's household versus what's kind of commercial.
Demolition waste and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, just, like someone, there's a bed down in their backyard and they hire someone to haul it in, that's a lot of weight.
But that actually is not unfair to be included, because you're not doing it that often. It's more the commercial
Yeah,
CDW stuff that would skew
but it
it.
could also be coming from Newton, like we can't track exactly where that's coming from. It's more community based.
Interesting.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, just please, I'll obviously, Gabby and I see each other all the time, so happy to take suggestions on because we do track of most of what we do. So, you know, I can get those kind of reports and we can talk about how to present that.
Perfect.
All right, you guys mind if I?
Yeah.
All right, great. I really appreciate the chance to meet.
You wanna talk more?
I can talk. I love.
That's trash.
I mean, I honestly do. I told Gabby I had said, start talking too much, just like kick it under the table. But I do go on. Yes.
If you do that, Connecticut, trip, love to hear back what you.
Yeah, I keep hearing about some of these small ones getting built and, you know, they lost, so there was a big incinerator for trash on the Connecticut River outside of Hartford, and it handled 800,000 tons per year. And starting at around like 2010, they were like, boy, this thing's gonna fail pretty soon, we gotta come up with a plan. And they kept looking at it and looking at it, and they just watched it, they kept presenting plans, no one wanted to like fund it, and they just let it fail. And now they've got 800 tons that they have to ship out on, you know, by truck, and it's like, you gotta think like, what's that doing to the road, you know? I mean, you take 800,000 tons, but again, you know, incineration's not ideal either, we do it, I think it's probably better than a lot of things, but it's.
Well, certainly the further you're gonna haul it away, the better incineration looks. Right, I mean, with the roads and you know, exhaust and
Yeah.
just the mileage of driving to Ohio to carry the train.
Train is what they're doing now,
Yeah.
a lot of C and D is going out of state. But most, there's some really interesting, I'll try and get you there's really interesting. Data on what trash stays within New England and what trash goes out. And mostly what we're sending to Ohio is C and D. And that's going by rail.
Yeah.
So, but Massachusetts is real heavy on the incinerators. That's what we've done, and you know, Kevin Keane asked me, he goes, is that considered environmentally good for? It's incineration, I mean, you're generating electricity out of it, so there's a benefit.
Well, and
Still.
we have pretty good environmental laws on the scrubbing stuff. That's the
Yeah,
other thing.
and the EPA held.
But would you sit above one of those stacks?
Well, would you
No, you wouldn't want to, right?
wanna live down?
But at least you feel like there are places where they incinerate stuff in other parts of the world. where
Pits, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything goes.
100%. All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Take care, nice to meet you.
That was good.
Yeah, a lot of it. I was just searching, it looks like one of the Connecticut ones. So there's a Connecticut Green Bank, that's a really super organization. I don't think the Mass CEC, has any capacity, there are very few green banks in the country, and the
I think we.
The few attempts to do it on a federal level have not been successful, but I know that the Connecticut Green Bank is often very enthusiastic about sharing knowledge, and so if we wanted to, if one that Matt's gonna go visit is this one, then I think it could be cool to reach out to the Connecticut Green Bank. Really super organization.
They've really been leaders.
Yeah, they're awesome. Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda is discussion of the fiscal year 26 community work plan.
So I can start and then Paul and Nick, if you wanna jump in. So just for a recap, so I met with Paul and Nick just to kind of touch base on how we think process went with our first fiscal year for the committee, and thinking about structure moving forward. Just make sure we have some, targets in mind as we're moving forward, like in terms of our, usual items. Advising select board for priorities is gonna be a yearly activity, so that will always be in the mix. Now that the matching grant fund has been approved through town meeting, whenever we have a grant that requires a match that we'd like to review, that's gonna, come in the mix for the climate action committee to review and approve. We did talk a little bit about updating the roadmap, which I know is wild to even say because it was just adopted by the select board last year. But 2029 will be 5 years. So we were looking at maybe 2027 to start conversations about doing an update. Which would mean that we would potentially need to look at FY 27 for acquiring funding to do that update. If we think we need to use consulting services again, yeah, and we just started in DPW talking about our budget for FY 27, so it's very timely. So I'm gonna follow up with Karis and Dave just to like get that on the radar, that that's something that we might want to look at for this budget cycle. I think it's possible that could go to FY 28 and start later in the year, but we should start having the conversation. And then in terms of other priorities, short term, I think it would be good just to make sure we're all on the same page for working groups. So with embodied carbon, my understanding is that we will develop some kind of policy recommendations from the research that's gonna happen this year. We don't know what form those will take yet, if that focus is gonna be municipal or something residential, but that's the hope for this fiscal year. Would you say that's accurate, Stephen?
I would say that's accurate. And yes.
And then for EV working group, looking at opportunities to incentivize both residential and fleet for conversion, and then multifamily charging as well as municipal parking lots. Is that accurate for?
I guess it takes into consideration the fact that a lot of the rules are gonna change in September, of course. We were hoping that wasn't the case, that it would have extended 2026, that was the House plan, but the House plan was overridden by the Senate plan, which is September 2005. So all incentives will be axed essentially.
Federal.
Federal. Yep.
Federal.
We still have the state ones though.
Yeah, so, I still think that people are gonna buy EVs, but I still think it's gonna happen, and I think a lot of the dealers are gonna have inventory and they need to sell them, so they're gonna have to do things to sell them. They're just not gonna be able to stop, and, but there are, there are problems, plants are converting from EV to making trucks again, Chevy announced that they're gonna take a plant that was gonna make EVs, and you're gonna make large trucks. So, part of the system is going back, but I think you see a lot of EVs on the road right now, and people adopt them, and think that there's still room for.
Yeah, you'll continue to see, because the large manufacturer, they may be doing things that are tactical if they have to, but GM has put huge investment into batteries, and they're doing an amazing amount. You can, one of the least expensive cars you can get is an Equinox, an EV, so.
Right.
I
should know.
And they all realize they have to do it, because if they don't, they're eventually gonna get eaten by the Chinese.
And the guys at Chevy told me, they said, look, we have a lot of Equinoxes and we need to sell these, and people are buying them. It's actually a good car, so I think there's still a role to showcase and to promote this.
Yeah, I think actually one of the biggest lessons of the Biden administration was the slowness with which they rolled out the EV infrastructure.
That was so frustrating.
that was an own goal. And if we can figure out how to accelerate EV infrastructure locally and other counties on that, and we push our state, I mean, the state really should be ramming through as many high-speed chargers as they can get in the Massachusetts network. That should be a priority. Yeah, and we have to figure out a way to convince our legislatures to try to push that. They can't be waiting for the feds to do it. The
Well, they know they can't figure it out. Well,
So the funding is gone, so we have to only, but you have to be able to drive long distances. But we also need to make sure that local families can charge, especially the ones in those apartment buildings.
I reached out again to each of those places right before I left at the end of May. I got one response. I think it was from AI Robot in Colorado. So that was tough, but I think
What did the robot say?
it was like, we'd be happy to chat. Go to our website, and they sent me a link to the website, which I used it. But that's frustrating. But I think the next step, now that I have a little more time, might just be to go in person and just try to get like the email directly of a manager or someone that works there
Yeah.
and schedule it that way as opposed to going through their website emailing systems.
Which one is this?
Charles River.
Yeah.
Be aware that a lot of the on-site managers
They're
are
not gonna-
23, 24-year-olds.
Yeah.
Trying to get into property management, and they don't have any power.
Right.
The real power is somebody they talk to or email.
Yeah. So
Get that
I might
person.
get that person. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, if we don't find that person.
Yeah.
We can go in person.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Starting point.
Okay.
See if I can find these now.
Having said that, I am still in favor of, every quarterly in-town, EV displays. That where people can come on a Saturday and they'll be in there and they can drive it, they can drive my EV. Or both my EVs, they can, sit there and I can show price sheets and what they can do and can't do, and I think exposure is still important, so, I think it can be done. Has to be done.
and people are still too fixated on the stuff that aren't really the issues, especially in multifamily. Everyone in this town has more than one car. There really is, range anxiety really doesn't matter for certain things.
Right.
Right, and it's the mantra keeps getting repeated, and what people don't see is how much fun they are to drive, how much less, I have owned my Tesla 5, 6, I don't know how many years we've had it, I pay nothing. No maintenance,
Right.
Zip.
There's a lot of that.
That's just, people need to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you live in a house, yeah, huh?
I had to change my brakes,
Ah,
But you can do that on the other car.
it happens. Anyways,
but yeah,
so, I think we should move forward the way I'm doing and continue to do that.
do you think to your point about trying to get EVs and that you'll be able to do it on a regular basis? You've done it, we've done it, so like it's this huge effort to do the two things. Could we find some way, maybe contacting some of them, especially as some of them want to sell this stuff, getting in touch with some deals, could we find some way of essentially pre-approving, getting something set up at a certain place in town that every couple of months, do all the stuff in advance with the police and fire and say, okay, once a month, you're gonna go down to where the Rosemary Pool Complex, or whatever it is, right? And, and the police, the fire, all the permits are done, and you just say, hey, this month, which dealer can we get there? How many people can we get? If you don't get somebody every month, okay, but it's just creating a single off event you did it, right? You did it for us, we did it, it's huge. But if we could figure out a way of saying, this is the month, maybe there's 2 locations, get all the permitting done and all the police and fire have been say, this is gonna be 2 hours. And then you can tell dealers, because sometimes you tell them we're doing this and they can't do it, but if you tell them, hey, we do this once a month. I think a bunch of those dealers will be happy to say, I'd come out in April.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. From a staff perspective, I feel like I could use some support with some of the organizing for
Yes.
that.
Yes,
Um,
it's a lot.
but if that's maybe a goal for the working group that will like do the policy piece with multifamily, I'm hoping we'll capture that with this parking requirements review that we're doing with planning board to hopefully just bake in EV charger requirements. But maybe that's the second part that the work group is focusing on education and engagement events.
Yeah, I mean, for you, and we want to overbring you, but I think the piece that you could do for this is to go to all the relevant departments and say, look, we've done this before, right? Green Eden did it, we did it for Western, right? And it was not. Can you tell me, fire department, police department, traffic, whoever, what would it take if we wanted to do this? Make it available on a monthly basis, potentially, if maybe we pick a site, right, one of the sites,
Yeah,
what would it take?
yeah,
And then, then we could work on it, because, part of this is the first time we do something, they're all trying to figure out what are the problems, right? We've done it a couple of times, and you say, just tell us, right?
yeah.
And then maybe we can get some help and say, okay, once you've lined it up, the police know, okay, this is what it's gonna look like.
Yeah.
Right, it's not unusual.
I think that's a great idea, and I'm happy to commit to taking that
Yeah.
on and figuring out what would be required for coordination with other departments. I can take that piece. Okay, the only other piece that I wanted to flag, and I had mentioned this to Paul and Nick, was I would also love this fiscal year to do a annual progress update for like roadmap or climate related data in general. This is something that is in the roadmap. Haven't done it in that way yet. We did give an update to the select board on how we're doing with roadmap actions, so they can see like how many have we done, but there's not any kind of like formal like public reach for that. So that's the only other piece that I think would be great to have input from the committee to figure out what form should this take. Is this a one-time thing? Is this something that we want to have like some communities have trackers up for their roadmap? And then-
Dashboards.
Yeah,
Dashboard,
dashboard that
yeah.
just stays there and just continually gets updated from time to time.
Yeah,
But that's the other piece that I would love to get feedback from the committee on.
I think a dashboard would be a great idea. Because then it's not a discrete item that you have to like build up to and think about.
Yeah.
You had the format, you knew what the things are that we want to crow about. How many actions completed, how many tons of waste diverted, how many EVs on the road, how many chargers, things like that we could easily quantify. There's gonna be harder ones to quantify. Your Needham Power for
Oh, power choice,
power choice, like you could put like all of that into a dashboard that could then also amplified through the news you need and other
Yeah, we have single places like, you can go look at what the RTS solar is generating, but you gotta remember where the thing is.
Yeah, so
Right.
pull it all together. I think KLA has a dashboard that at one point they were giving away. I don't know if they're still doing it, but we could reach out to them and say, do you still have that web dashboard? And if so, what would it cost?
Nick has his hand up, but you can't see it on the screen.
So one of the other things I think we talked about, Gabby, in tune with the dashboard is also doing more outreach, both within other committees as well as to the broader town, just in terms of who we are, what we do, why we're important, and maybe revising that roadshow you had, Stephen, with the CAPC and cloning you perhaps to do it.
And is that something that you think is like every quarter we try to reach a different committee or board or?
I hadn't thought about a metric, but it would be good to have a metric like that to block out time, and maybe I can do some outreach. We can reach out particularly, we've got people from planning, Concon, PBBC, but to go to your committees and say, well, here's the overall package, and kind of following up on Artie's comment, for example, with the large house committee, that it'd be helpful to have input on embodied carbon. So because in a way, a lot of what we do I would say it adds to other committees' subject matter expertise. Someone else might say we step on other people's turf. But to sort of build some of those.
Nick, the idea that you have right there with like this, the planning board, for example, the embodied carbon input. That was the model that I think was most successful for the climate action planning committee, is when we kept it very narrowly focused on the committee's charge. So we went to planning board, we talked about solar bylaw, right? Like that was very specific. We went to them and they had to work on it. We talked about what was the other major zoning thing we did? Well, the building, the specialized code.
Specialized stretch code,
Yeah.
Specialized stretch code, right? So those things were, we didn't talk much about the rest of this stuff. And I think that would be the model I would recommend, because time is precious for them. It's precious for
Right.
whoever's going before those committees.
No, and I think that's a very good point. Maybe for the broader public to talk about the roadmap, but talk about waste reduction, talk about, I mean, we still have issues. Embodied carbon really comes into planning, large house, tree committee, PBBC. EV has some planning and economic development considerations.
Well, I would make sure that we, for the other boards, make sure we pick a couple of very high profile things, because part of this is to inform and educate. You're right, you don't want to take too much time, but there's people on those committees who have other networks in town. We want them to know that, yeah, this is what we do as relevant to your committee, but oh, by the way, here's some other things that are important that we're doing, even in just brief form. Because, you sort of have a captive audience if you keep it short.
Yeah, because we are an overlap committee in a way.
Climate intersects everything.
Okay, yeah, I mean, Nick, I would love to work on that with you if you are willing to share some
Yeah.
of your time for that.
Definitely.
But I think what you have described would be wonderful, just to have something that's happening with decent frequency. Okay,
And
I
maybe I was just this just popped into my head, maybe to sit down, if we can talk to, for example, you, Erwin, or Fred, or what what areas, how should we go to your broader committee?
That's a good idea. Erwin?
Yeah, I wish I could remember exactly what Lynn Denninger said a few meetings ago, but she articulated exactly what the right approach should be going to a committee, sort of to get them to buy in rather than to try to push something upon them, get them to really think about how they could buy into what our objectives are and how it dovetails with what they might be doing.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember exactly what she said, but she enunciated a really good idea on how to do that.
Yeah, no, that's a good reminder. I remember what you're talking about now. Maybe when Lynn's back, we can.
I could ask her.
Yeah,
I'm sure she would remember it a lot better than I can.
okay. So from what Nick, Paul, and I talked about, I feel like those 3 topics is already plenty for this group to chew on top of regular ongoing responsibilities, and the fact that there are 3 committees working on bylaws that we may also want to weigh in on at some point. So I feel like that's a good amount on everyone's plate for FY26, but is there anything else that other people wanted to flag?
We accomplished that. That's great.
Keeping focused and it's good.
Great. We should keep it. Good.
I think we sort of hit on a bunch of these.
Yeah,
We definitely on the PB working group.
Mhm.
I don't know if you wanna add more on
Body carbon. So we did talk about two things. One is, I haven't given you any time to meet with the intern yet, but hopefully getting the intern to help a little bit on some research. One would be going a little deeper on the other municipalities, policies and or legislation around body carbon to get a little bit more, data on what's out there. And maybe some qualitative feedback from those towns on how those efforts are going. So it's a little bit deeper than what's in the paper today. So that would be one line of research. The second would be, can we come up with a back of an envelope calculation for the large house committee on what the embodied carbon is, the average home that's being torn down, and what the embodied carbon of the new home we put in it, and try to find out, like, where's that break even point between destroying a 1920s 1,500 square foot home that might have the efficiency of X, and replacing it with even an all electric 5,000 square foot home, which is much more efficient today. Is there? I have no concept on whether or not we should be rooting for that.
Right.
You know, maybe let me do the analysis and we come out and say, you know what, aside from the consequences of pricing people out of the town, which is definitely one of their charges, here are the climate impacts of this legislation. And maybe there's even like a size point at which the break-even point is so far out in the future, we're probably never going to hit it. Right? If you do a 10,000 square foot home that's super efficient, you're still going to use more electricity over 50 years than you would if you just insulated the 1920s home and went to heat pumps. So I don't know how we're going to do that. I don't know if there's any organizations that have come up with this, but if anybody comes across any sources, Gabby and I said maybe we should like reach out to the MIT Climate Lab and ask them if they might want to try to come up with a tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of going back to your first thing about the intern. One thing that we were discussing when we met was utilizing students more than we do.
Like university students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so whether it's on the waste management, is there someone at Olin that studies incinerators or some sort of, that's like the most local school we could get, right? Obviously, we could go to MIT and Harvard and the Tufts, where they have those sustainability specialties, but yeah, I think we should lean on students to help us with some of that legwork, because it's a win-win situation. It activates students and it's good real world experience for them as well. So yeah, I think it would be really interesting to see. I mean, I know that when I was in grad school, there was an entire class on life cycle analysis, and there are professors that specialize in that.
So if we find some of those folks, maybe they already have a back of the envelope calculator out there, but I think about like the stretch specialized code. Remember those infographics that showed like the break even point for the homeowner,
Right.
what the cash out at the door is, and
Yep.
how fast they make it back. That's what I'm thinking. Like, if you tear down a house and it's 3x larger, here's your break even point. It's 7 years, it's 70 years. I don't know what it is. But that would be an interesting data point. And I kind of feel like that's what Artie was asking for. I wasn't here at the meeting, but. All right. So those are the 2 lines we'll work on. Nick's got a hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna throw in, we can check and Lynn might know some resources, not to,
Lynn,
cause NESE, the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association, that's the kind of thing where somebody's working on a paper on that.
okay, I'll reach out to Lynn then.
Yeah,
That's a good idea. When is she back?
I don't know. I didn't know she went
Is she
somewhere.
out?
She was away this week,
Okay.
but
I'll drop her an email and see if we can brainstorm a little bit. Thanks for that suggestion.
Alright, get over to you for the sustainability manager's report.
Yes. I. One second, play. Sorry. Please, so I can switch tabs. Okay. So. Call it a couple things. We just got a grant. Earlier this month for. $7,500 towards another F-150 Lightning, that'll be to the water division. Our first F-150 Lightning division for engineering is supposed to be arriving next month. So this second one,
You guys could drive it.
I actually can't remember who's.
See, we have to find out who's the lead foot.
Yeah. Got some folks very excited about them. But that was actually one thing I talked about with John, our fleet supervisor, was that when we get one of these, it would be great to have that be part of like their EV showcase. Because we'd love to show that off as our next vehicle. I'm
assuming that means there's a charger for that, so.
We are working on the charger. The charger is going to be at Charles River. That is going to be a fleet only charger because there's limited access for Charles River Water Treatment Plant. But we have the charger on order. I would expect it'll be here by
Level
September.
2 or level 3?
Just level 2.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
just
fine.
level 2. And it's because it's fleet only. It's going to just be wall mounted. Yeah, that's the thing for that.
What's the range on the F-150? Did you get the commercial, like the 150? At one point they were making a very like a low range for the like municipal fleet type at a lower cost. I don't know if they're doing that still.
I have the range in my email, but I could not tell you what that number is off the top of my head, but I think it's in the 200s.
The 200, so I guess it's not the
Yeah,
big
I don't-
battery, it's a small battery.
Yeah, I can double check that for you though. Started.
Can you just click up there, number 6?
Oh, sure. Yes, we just had our kickoff with MAPC for the development of this solar canopy guide and assessment of our municipal parking lots for solar canopies. The plan is for that project to be completed by the end of December. So MAPC, some grant funded projects, and their staff are covering all the costs for putting together that guide. We basically have like a series of questions that we're hoping to answer through that. So things about like guidance for optimal siting, PPAs versus ownership for canopies, thinking about like stormwater, landscaping, kind of like
Did you get the material? Did we finally get you the material?
Yes.
You have all the material that
I have
we did
that.
last time with, it did that and we looked at them, okay.
yes, and
Okay,
I'm
great.
sharing that with MAPC. They're gonna do like a similar GIS assessment of our municipal parking lots. We gave them a list. I think we gave them 15 parking lots that are ranked based on what we think is best for siting. So they'll go through those and see what the options would be for solar canopies at those locations, if they see any obstacles with those. Yeah, any other questions about that?
No, just wanted, yeah, that's great.
Do you have a sense, either like total area of the lots, or did you take a swag at how much maybe solar capacity you could fit there?
Not yet, but they should tell us
Yeah.
that, except for the lots that were already looked at with Green Needham.
Yeah, the ones we did, which I think were, well, Newman, obviously, because of the charger there and wanting to make sure we plan for that.
Yeah,
Benita Williams, Broadman, maybe, we didn't do the municipal, I don't think we did the municipal, the commercial owned lots.
Yeah.
We did the schools and the other,
Yeah.
buildings.
Yeah, but they will put together like a summary for us of what they think of total potential.
Curious about that vehicle to everything project.
Oh, yes, we did put in our application for this week, actually. I think it's gonna be a very competitive application process. Because basically it's a free level 3 charger. But they're kind of looking for like unicorn sites where you have sufficient capacity at the location to do level 3 charger without any infrastructure upgrades. And it has to be a location that they could install a charger at by December 2025, which is very fast for Eversource. They also are giving preference to environmental justice communities, and we don't have any state identified environmental justice blocks in Edom.
You're number 5, are we talking about number 5?
Number 5,
Okay.
yep, for the vehicle to everything project. So they're gonna put in a level 3 bidirectional charger. Their preference is also for electric buses. So our Ford F-150s are the Ford F-150 Lightning will be the only vehicle we have right now that can do bidirectional charging. Until we get our electric bus.
Yeah.
So they're, I think, ranking higher communities who already have electric buses and would like to test bidirectional charging with those.
Yeah.
The charger that we're planning to install at Newman is not going to be bidirectional because it is very new technology and we're spending a lot of money on that charger. I think there's just more comfort with what's already known with the DC fast chargers. But it'll be really interesting to see the results of this pilot program.
Yeah.
They're looking at a good. Their timeline is very quick. I was pretty bowled over when I saw that they were going to do all these things in under a year. So, yeah, we'll get our name in. So maybe we'll get one. We'll see. We put it in there.
When will the bus be procured?
So we have to get our charger in first.
Mhm.
We submitted our work order with Eversource to do the design for the electrical infrastructure upgrades that are needed at the site. So the hope is that this is a 12-month process, might be more like an 18-month process, depending on how long it takes us to get a new transformer.
Because those are on back order still.
Yeah, that's our biggest hurdle, is probably gonna be the transformer, but we're trying to time it out so that when we think we're at, like, maybe within like a 6 months remaining on the charger, then we'd order the bus, because the bus is like a 6 to 8 month wait. So we're trying to sequence those carefully,
That's great.
working on it. I think the only other thing I wanted to mention was that we are planning to apply for a new grant program this month. For the Cooling Corridors Grant Program for tree planting.
Is this the one is this an addition to the one, or is this the one
This
we
is an
gave?
addition.
Okay,
Yeah, we
so
still
the
haven't
one
heard
we
back
gave you a letter
from
for.
yeah, we still haven't heard back on the other MAPC one.
Okay,
That one will probably be announced in September, I think was their target for that one. This one is a little bit more streamlined. They're just looking for communities to like pre-identify locations for tree planting and then like submit on a map where you're thinking, and then we'll see who they pick for that. So,
this one is for street trees, right?
yes, this is street trees.
That's good.
Yep. And so what we did was we looked at our map of our sidewalks that are part of our Safe Routes to Schools program. So we have those sidewalks, and then we overlaid that with our land surface temperature map to see like what are the hottest areas of town. So we have gone through and prioritized streets. This was out the other day with at our superintendent of Parks and Forestry. So we're just mapping all of those now. So we'll submit that grant this month. This is also going to be a competitive grant program. They have a pretty limited budget this time around, but we're planning to put in a request for about $100,000.
Is that gonna support also the And the maintenance of the trees over the first couple of years they established, they're just gonna cost of the trees or
It's
the.
it's a 2-year grant
Okay.
that has to include maintenance and watering, and then the expectation is after 2 years, the town will take over maintenance for those trees.
But that's fun, because that's a big part of this is Ed just doesn't have the resources
Yeah.
to do more trees.
Yeah.
So this would be a big help to be able to get more trees on.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. We're limited in many ways with our tree planting program from like a staff perspective.
Yeah,
We just want
which
to
is-
staff to meet the demand that
Yeah, a lot
We're
of
getting
people
from-
want trees and
yeah,
there's just only so
we only
many.
have 4 certified
Are the
arborists,
heat
yeah.
maps locally generated, or are they part of?
No, we're using the Trust for Public Land map, which is a national data set. But there are multiple heat maps, like MAPC has one, the state has one, the TPL one is just like a little bit more granular.
So the one you use, is it granular enough to
It's
like?
very granular, like we don't even get picked up on the state one. Because we do have some areas that aren't incredibly dense for canopy, so like we're missing a lot of chunks, but TBL is like very, yeah.
So
very
what did you
granular.
find? I mean, for this?
Yeah, where were they?
Where were the neighborhoods?
Chestnut Street?
Down, yeah, as I was gonna downtown, unsurprisingly, like all around town hall, Needham Heights,
Yeah.
the industrial park area, near Cutler. Those were the top 3.
Enough to be
That too?
competitive with the other towns who are gonna have much larger heat islands, or how is this gonna work? Like, are we gonna be competitive because we don't have a lot of heat islands, or how do you think that's gonna work?
I think that if there's a lot of communities who have larger heat islands, we will not get this grant. But I don't know, this is a very short, there's like a 1-month turnaround for this grant, it's very quick,
Okay.
which might be a deterrent for some communities. And there's honestly like more required for staff. Like I haven't applied for a grant yet where we have to develop a map in order to do the application, and if you don't have a GIS manager, I don't know how other towns are doing their maps.
How does that map overlay with like the TIPS grant for Highland and then the planned or non-planned?
Tips,
I'm sorry, there's a grant that's potentially redoing traffic patterns from Webster down to May Street.
Mhm.
So potentially even putting in bike lanes, which could potentially move curb cuts, which could potentially move trees. I wonder, are you connecting with them at all?
We've kind of been avoiding that area.
Okay, all right.
I think there's
Are you bound to your map?
Oh, what
Like,
is it?
Like, if you get the grants, are you bound to the map, or can you say, well, now we have this new
Mhm.
sidewalk curb cut, we're gonna put a tree there, not where we said it was going to be?
I think there would be some wiggle room, but it would be limited. I think the expectation with us doing all this upfront work of like checking utility lines, checking tie cards, like they want us to do the hard work upfront to determine like an exact location.
Yeah.
So if it's like moving, 1 block down, that might be okay, but outside of that, I think they.
I think it might be more about like the curb cuts here, comes here.
And maybe that timing will be okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. We'll see. This is our first time applying for this one too, so there'll be some lessons learned from this regardless. And then on the zero waste category, we have started talking with nutrition services about doing a pilot for a food donation fridge at one of the schools. We're still trying to identify which school would be the best candidate and also find the right organization to partner with to accept the donations. But this is something that other municipalities have implemented to help cut back on food waste, and something we were interested in checking out. And then with the public health division, we've been working on putting together some information for food establishments about the state food waste diversion and organics waste ban. So opportunities to partner with different organizations to do food pickups, and learn more about what's gonna be required, or what is required with the organic waste ban that's already in place. Any questions on, anything else from
Sure.
this?
With the food waste, they've been discussing like the actual materials, like the forks, knives, trays. I know the trays got switched.
You mean like the disposables,
Yeah.
like is public health enforcing the requirement?
Or is that
Other-
been talked about? Or is that just more, or like just the food itself?
This piece is just focused on the food waste. Public health is responsible for enforcing. Well, not enforcing, we do have a black plastics.
ban without,
ban.
without an enforcement
Enforcement.
mechanism.
Thank
Thank you to me.
Thank you, Cindy.
They can educate people about it.
Yes.
But there's nothing,
We don't have.
yeah, no penalties. I would say like, there's not really anything else might not be shared with communities, or not communities, with businesses from, public health about data containers or things like that.
Yeah.
Oh, were you asking more about the,
The
skip the
school.
steps though?
No, the school, the
school
school
utensils.
utensils.
Oh, okay, really, missed that. Not yet, but that is something they're interested in. I know I've talked to Jen a little bit about that, like trays was obviously a huge one. The next step is utensils. There are schools who are doing that, it's very expensive, but I think that's on the horizon.
Got it. Like I know at our school, we got, instead of like the plastic fruit cups or whatever, we got compostable ones. I'm not sure how much of a increase in price that was, but I can probably try to figure out what company and cost that was.
Yeah, I'd be curious who they're using, if you
Yeah.
can find that out.
I'm convinced that there's somewhere a model, because when I was in Barcelona and I went into McDonald's, I'm sorry, I went into McDonald's.
We wanted to, we won't pursue why, but okay.
There's
The
no other
entire
there's no other
meal,
food
the-
alternatives. in
Yeah.
Barcelona.
Every single piece of packaging was paper. The straw was paper, the cup was paper, the bag was paper, the lid of the cup was paper. It was astonishing.
Yeah.
And you know, it was totally fine, like there was no spills, there was no sogginess, there was nothing.
Yeah.
And maybe they've got wax in it and I'm not aware of the wax in
But
it.
even so, it's not.
But I mean, we're talking about a fast food restaurant that has overseas, not here,
Not here.
figured out how to get plastic completely out of the
Yeah.
mix. That is that's a huge cost driver for McDonald's over there. Now, maybe they were forced to do that because of legislation there.
Probably were, but on the other hand, that means all their stuff can probably be disposed of in the same way. Right?
I think we need to make a trip to
Oh,
try.
I think so too. And bring in some real food and just go visit.
When I was a kid, McDonald's was all in paper. When I was a little kid,
Yeah.
Big Mac,
Yeah.
hold up in the box.
Everything's in paper.
That's all it was.
That's what.
That's changed.
We ended on Big Macs.
We ended on Big
Interesting.
Macs.
Yeah, interesting.
Sorry about that. Any other issues or?
Yeah, the only other thing I've thrown on here, I do think it would be good to set a meeting schedule for FY 26.
What happened to our Monday slot? So they stomp on that?
No one has done it. We have had to be flexible when other committees have had public listening sessions.
Yeah.
I think had originally said like first and third Mondays, which just also happens to be when everyone else figured out that other committees aren't meeting, so. There's like some level of competition for that, but if the group is comfortable with sticking to first Mondays, barring holidays, I'm happy to like put together that list of dates, check against holidays.
Just as long as it's 6 o'clock start or later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First Mondays at 6 is what I got. I would love to keep that.
I think we ran into trouble with the large house. That might have been the beginning of
Yes.
our downfall. And
Large House is now meeting first, sometimes third Mondays, but Artie was on Large House.
Right.
And now, yeah, I was gonna say Eric is replacing
Yeah.
him for planning board, but now we don't have a person for Large House. But we will have Eric for planning board.
Yeah.
Well, first Monday be good, that's great.
Except for Labor Day, which is on the first
Well-
Monday.
Erwin?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have an issue with the first Monday because my teaching schedule, I'll be teaching Monday and Wednesday evenings, beginning in
Is
September.
that every Monday?
Every Monday, every Wednesday from early September to the middle of December. Is it possible to have some on a Tuesday instead of Monday?
Tuesday's bad because of the other board meetings that we have.
Planning board and
Select
select
board
board
Thursday.
alternate on Tuesdays.
Or Thursday?
Thursday we have Concom for second and fourth. We could look at first and third Thursdays.
So we're trying to just, but
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm also I'm the new staff liaison for trees, and we are also gonna be talking about our schedule. And Thursdays might come up there as well.
I'm just asking if it could kind of rotate.
Yeah, maybe
does
like
it-
it's a Monday, Thursday.
Again, that's just my schedule, so whatever's best for the committee. Lynn and Stuart are more than capable of filling in if I'm not able to attend.
Okay. Well, any thoughts from the rest of the group?
I'm not opposed to moving around a little bit if we lay it out months in advance.
Yeah,
Um,
but that's what I'm hoping to do is like I'll put together a list of every date, and then the next meeting the group can sign off on that.
I do worry about the people who are on more than one committee, though. It's hard if you don't have a set day every month that you're meeting. Because the other committee might need.
it also allows you to work around stuff if you get it set early, to some degree.
Yeah.
But,
Well, maybe we can try for first Mondays, and then the months where there's another like holiday or town meeting or something like that, we could look at the Thursday as a replacement.
yeah, because you've got September. And
Yeah,
we've
we've got a
got,
few.
October town, I don't know when Veterans Day is this year, and then you've got this town
Tuesday.
I
meeting
think it's a
on,
Tuesday.
okay.
Okay, I will put together that document then for everyone to review for the next meeting. Okay.
All right. Any other issues that anyone wants to bring up? Anything?
Good. That's everything, right?
All right.
I do think we need to grill Stephen on eating McDonald's in Barcelona, but
It was an emergency, I'm just saying.
Is there no meeting in August?
There's a meeting on August 5th, that one we had already scheduled.
Monday?
Thursday, I think.
Is it-
Tuesday.
So that one got moved?
Yeah,
There was some other oddball days.
I think there's something on Monday night, I can't remember, it was like.
Large house,
Be a
large house was the Monday out. Yeah, so you moved that one to Tuesday?
Tuesday, August 5th. Yep. That's the only other meeting you have a date scheduled for at this time.
So motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Do a roll call then?
Yeah.
All right. Starting online. Nick,
I,
Aye.
Erwin?
Aye.
Alright,
Thank you.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, good night.
Good night.